I want all of you to imagine that you are on a flight. Nothing long, maybe something from Juneau to Seattle or Juneau to Anchorage. And you've just taken off and you're lounging back in your luxurious middle seat when you realize that the cabin of your aircraft is silent because both engines have failed. Today, I want to talk about the event which the National Transportation Safety Board has dubbed the most successful ditching in aviation history, known as the Miracle on the Hudson, and where the people involved are today, as 2014 marks the 5th anniversary of this miraculous landing. Most information of this event comes from the first-hand accounts of the passengers, or the people personally involved, such as the passengers, the crew, the first responders, and the pilot, Captain Sullenberger, known to the world now as Sully. To begin, I'll go back and talk about what went wrong on Flight 1549, explain why Captain Sullenberger decided to land on the Hudson River, and finally visit where the pilot and some passengers are today and what the experience taught them and what we can learn from them as well. Flight 1549 was a routine flight scheduled to take off January 15, 2009 from New York City's LaGuardia Airport, stopping briefly in Charlotte, North Carolina before continuing on to SeaTac Tacoma International Airport. A bird strike occurred about 3 minutes after takeoff at an altitude of 3,000 feet, taking out both engines. Passengers reported seeing flames coming from the engines and the smell of jet fuel in the cabin. In an interview with Katie Couric on 60 Minutes, Sully said the bird strike caused the worst sickening pit-of-your-stomach falling through the floor feeling he had ever experienced. The plane then began descending at a rate of 18 feet per second, giving Sully and his co-pilot about 3 more minutes of airtime. In these 3 minutes, Officer Skiles began going through the 3-page emergency checklist, and Sully contacted Flight Control. When Flight Controller Patrick Harton arranged for emergency landings at both LaGuardia Airport in New York City and Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, Sully said he was unable to make either, and that he was going to be in the Hudson. When Harton testified to Congress a month after the landing, he said he believed that he would be the last person to talk to anyone on that plane alive. Flight simulations have since shown that the aircraft was traveling way too fast to land back at LaGuardia. The plane would have most likely overshot the runway. If the plane had had altitude enough to make it to Teterboro Airport, the landing would have still been risky because its runways were not built to accommodate large commercial aircraft. This left the Hudson River as the only and last possible option. The smooth, sheltered water, location between 2 ferry terminals, and the proximity to the NYPD was ideal for an emergency landing under the circumstances. But in order for this to happen, many things had to occur at once. For example, the plane had to avoid the George Washington Bridge, which it did by only 900 feet, and land at an angle of 11 degrees with the nose slightly up and the wings perfectly level. If either an engine or a wing had clipped the water, the landing would have been disastrous. Security cameras on buildings beside the Hudson caught the landing on tape, and these videos now have 1.6 million views on YouTube. Within moments of impact, ferries and divers were on scene, rescuing people from the water and wings of the aircraft. Hours later, it was confirmed that all 155 persons on the aircraft were accounted for, with only 5 serious injuries. Not surprisingly, Captain Sullenberger became a celebrity overnight. Within 24 hours of the event, President George W. Bush called to thank him, and President-elect Barack Obama invited him, his crew, and his family to the presidential inauguration ceremony. He was named one of the 100 most influential heroes and icons of 2009 by Time magazine, awarded the Key of the City of New York, and threw the first pitch of the 2009 Major League Baseball season for the San Francisco Giants. Sully retired from U.S. Airways after 30 years in 2010. Since then, he authored a New York Times bestselling book titled Highest Duty, My Search for What Really Matters, and a second book titled Making a Difference, Stories of Vision and Courage from America's Leaders. When Sully was asked the definition of a hero, he gave the following thoughtful response. My wife and I decided between ourselves that it describes someone who chooses to put himself at risk to save another. That doesn't quite fit my situation, which was thrust upon me suddenly. Certainly, my crew and I were up to the task, but I'm not sure it quite crosses the threshold of heroism. I think the idea of a hero is important, but sometimes in our culture, we overuse the word, and by overusing it, we diminish it. In my opinion, and I imagine the opinion of many others, it won't be diminishing the word by calling Sully a hero. It is safe to say what Captain Sullenberger did definitely crossed the threshold of humble heroism. Throughout the experience, the passengers formed a special bonds with each other, as only those who escape death together can. Since the flight, many have collaborated on books together and shared dinner tables. 2 even met at a reunion in Charlotte, North Carolina, fell in love, and were married 6 months later. Passenger Barry Leonard called those aboard the flight his second family, saying that it was soothing to be able to call any of them when he had a bad day or experienced a panic attack on an airplane. As a result of the crash, several passengers decided against putting their biggest dreams in life aside. Leonard climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with his son, who was also on the flight with him. Tracy Allen fulfilled her lifelong dream of visiting Italy with her best friend, who she met on the plane. And Clay Presley became friends with First Officer Skiles and faced his flight anxiety by earning his own pilot's license. In an interview with the Charlotte Observer, he joked that because he qualified to pilot float planes, he can now land on the water legally. Surviving a plane crash is life-changing, and no one knows this better than the passengers of Flight 1549. Since that bitterly cold day in 2009, many interviewed passengers have said since that the crash helped them realize what is and was not important in their lives. A lesson we can learn from these passengers is to focus on what is important in our own lives, but not allowing everyday activities to distract us from what really matters. That way, if you find yourself in a silent aircraft cabin, you will have no regrets.